so today we're going to be talking about arguments. So what's an argument? Is it something you get in with your parents, or is it something else? So the way that we want to think about arguments is that an argument is something that you're going to say to convince another person of a point that you're trying to make. What makes an argument good? Well, usually a good argument is going to have three parts. It's going to be clear in what you're trying to say. It's going to be organized, it's going to be logical, and there's going to be facts to back it up. Because otherwise, you're just going to be making statements that don't really mean anything to anyone, or you're going to be saying things that might not make as much sense. So these are the kinds of things you want to think about when you're trying to make an argument. And so we actually have an acronym for it that follows that progression. It's A, R, and E. So the assertion is a clear and concise way for you to make the key point that you're trying to make. The reasoning is the explanation for why that's true, and the evidence is the facts behind the argument that you're making. So you want to make sure that all the arguments that you're making have those three key components, because without one, it might not make sense to other people, or it might just not be that convincing. Cool. So we're gonna do an example here. So let's think about Chick-fil-A. So for some non-convincing arguments that don't use all of those parts of ARE, you could say something like, people like Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A gives all of its money to charity. That has an assertion and it has reasoning. The assertion is people like Chick-fil-A, the reasoning is they give all their money to charity. However, you would be hard-pressed to find evidence that Chick-fil-A gives all of their money to charity. So that argument might not be that convincing because there's no evidence to back it up. Similarly, if someone was trying to say that Business Insider projects Chick-fil-A sales to increase 12% to 15% this year, and they presented that argument as a reason why Chick-fil-A is good. Well, there's not a clear assertion there, and there's a lack of reasoning. So even though they presented some convincing evidence, unless you give some context for what your evidence is trying to accomplish, you're not going to convince people of the points that you're trying to make. So what might be a good, convincing example of what you would try to say about Chick-fil-A? Well, if you combine all the parts of ARE, you could say something like, Chick-fil-A is a popular restaurant because it satisfies customers, and we know that they satisfy customers because they scored the highest of any fast food restaurant in the American Customer Satisfaction Index. So that's a way that we can measure how satisfied people are. So the reason why that's a compelling argument is because it makes sure to state the argument in a short way that's concise and understandable. It has an assertion. It provides some explanation as to why that assertion is true. And then it offers some evidence to back up the claims that it's making about Chick-fil-A. Awesome. So how do you use this in a debate round? So when we're talking about ARE, you want to also keep in mind that this is the way that you want to structure the arguments that you're actually going to make in debate. So first, in debate we use cards. Cards are those pieces of evidence that you have in the packet. And just like the argument that we presented earlier, cards have assertions, reasoning, and evidence. So cards, if you break them down, they have three parts. The first part is the thing that comes at the top that's in bold. That's the tag. After that, you have the citation, which is going to have the author name, probably the date, and sometimes the qualifications. If the qualifications aren't there, they're going to be under that part of the card, and they're going to be in the next thing. That's the rest of the citation. And then last, we have the text, which is the article that we're quoting the person that we're citing as saying. So when you're breaking down a card, you want to think of the tag as the initial assertion with the initial reasoning to back it up. And then you can think of the text of the card as the evidence that supports that assertion and reasoning. So that's how you'd want to break it down in debate. Now, every author is going to be making arguments within the text of the article. And then you can follow the author's own assertion, reasoning, evidence structure. So you can find the different arguments that the author's making in the card, but the important argument that you're using the author to support in the debate round is going to be in the tag, and it's going to be followed with the reasoning that's also in the tag. So that's kind of how you want to think about how arguments break down in debate. So why does this matter? So we teach ARE so that way you can think of how you would anticipate a good argument or a bad argument in a debate round. So let's go back to our Chick-fil-A example real quick. If your opponent, if you were saying Chick-fil-A is very popular and your opponent was on the neg side, Your opponent claimed that Chick-fil-A is terrible because sometimes customers get food poisoning. Well, if you follow the ARE structure, what did they do and what didn't they do? They provide an assertion, Chick-fil-A is terrible. They provide a reasoning, people get food poisoning. However, they did not provide any evidence about how much food poisoning people get, how severe it is, or if it's actually a problem or not. So then, in the debate round, you can point out that they have made a compelling assertion and they provide reasoning for it. However, you can't vote for them because they have not provided any evidence. We have evidence to support our side. Here's what it is. That means you have to vote affirmative. So that's one way that you could do it. And just to contextualize it a little bit better, to debate specifically, if the other team decides to stand up and they read this argument that ends in, that says that the plan causes the economy to decline and economic decline causes extinction, but their speech time runs out as they say economic decline causes extinction, and they have not provided any reasoning or evidence to support it, if that happens in your debate round, then you don't have to respond to it as if it were the same argument that they would have read if they had read the evidence and the reasoning to support it. So if they can only read the part of the tag that says economic decline causes extinction and they don't provide the rest of everything, then you should point that out. You should make that a big deal to the judge. You should be like, okay, they have asserted that economic decline causes extinction. However, they have not provided any reasoning or evidence to support that. You can't vote for this argument as it is right now. And if they do choose to read evidence in a later speech, assuming it's the first constructive that they have, you can then preempt it by reading your own evidence. So a lot of times when I'm watching debate rounds, students will often answer arguments that haven't been supported by evidence with cards without setting up the first part. If you don't set up the first part, then the judge is probably just going to not notice that the other team didn't read the full text of the card. But if you make a big deal of it and you treat it like they made a mistake, which they did, then that would probably increase your speaker points, it would increase your credibility with the judge, and it has a better chance of helping you win your debate round. So that's ARE, and these are the kinds of things you want to keep in mind when you're making arguments in debate, because only when we provide an assertion that's clear and concise, some basic reasoning to back it up, and some evidence to support all of the arguments that we're trying to make, are we really going to ever convince a judge. Thanks.